The restaurant is filled with the soft hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and the rich aroma of gourmet dishes being prepared in the kitchen. The lighting is warm and elegant, casting a soft glow on the dark wood furnishings and crisp white tablecloths. The atmosphere is quiet but bustling, as waitstaff move gracefully between tables, attending to customers who are used to fine dining. At one of the corner tables, an elderly woman sits, carefully unfolding her napkin. Margaret Johnson, though older, carries herself with the grace of someone who has experienced life to the fullest. Her royal blue suit, paired with subtle accessories, commands respect without screaming for attention. Her presence exudes wisdom and self-assurance, an aura of someone who has earned her place in the world. Ryan Thompson, the young waiter assigned to her table, notices her from across the room. He immediately judges her based on her appearance, her age, race, and humble posture, thinking to himself that someone like her is out of place in such a prestigious establishment. He watches her, assuming she must have gotten lost on her way to the restaurant, or perhaps is confused about her reservation. He approaches her table with a cold, professional demeanor, though his mind is far from warm. When he reaches her, he hesitates for a moment, then glances down at her menu. His tone is dismissive as he asks, "Can I help you with anything, ma'am? Are you sure you're in the right place?" Margaret, still calm and poised, smiles politely, replying, "I'm fine, thank you," and places her menu aside. Ryan notices her slow movements and wonders if she's even aware of the menu or capable of ordering without assistance. He thinks nothing more of it, assuming that she will not be ordering anything substantial, as he believes people like her don't have the means to enjoy the kind of dining the restaurant offers. Margaret, unfazed by his condescending approach, patiently waits for the service to begin. But Ryan, clearly uncomfortable and skeptical about her being there, lingers at her table a moment too long, wondering if she might be a distraction, or, in his mind, a nuisance. The air is thick with Ryan's invisible judgment, and Margaret senses the slight, but she does not react. Instead, she continues to sit with dignity, waiting. As she does, the bustling restaurant around her continues without a hint of the growing tension at her table. Margaret calmly places her order, requesting a simple but elegant dish, something she's familiar with. She speaks with a soft yet confident voice, not rushing but choosing her words carefully. However, Ryan's attitude shifts as soon as he hears her order. A noticeable sigh escapes his lips as he rolls his eyes, clearly unimpressed by her choices. He slams the glass of water onto the table a little too forcefully, causing a few droplets to splash. His voice, previously professional, now has an edge of irritation as he mumbles, "Are you sure you can afford this place?" His words are laced with an undercurrent of judgment, a judgment he has unjustly passed based solely on Margaret's appearance. Margaret's eyes, still calm and poised, meet his. She doesn't flinch at his words. Instead, she responds quietly but firmly, "I don't think my ability to pay should concern you." Her grace is unmistakable, but to Ryan it feels like a challenge. The more she remains composed, the more agitated he becomes. His temper, which he's been barely able to keep in check, finally snaps. He raises his voice, making sure that not just Margaret, but the nearby tables hear him. "We have rules about loitering, ma'am," he declares, his words harsh and pointed. "If you're not here to dine properly, maybe you should leave." His hand gestures toward the door with a forceful motion, his face reddening with frustration. The restaurant around them falls silent for a brief moment, and a few heads turn toward the scene unfolding. Patrons who were previously enjoying their meals now eye the table with growing concern. Some whisper quietly to each other, unsure of what to make of the confrontation. The tension in the air thickens, and soon some people pull out their phones, discreetly recording the incident, though none speak out just yet. Margaret's expression remains serene, untouched by the rising tension. She doesn't shout or retaliate. Instead, she sits still, her hands folded neatly on the table. She's faced prejudice before, but she's learned over the years that responding with dignity is the only way to retain her power in such situations. Still, she can feel the weight of Ryan's words, and his tone stings despite her calm. But as Ryan continues his tirade, calling her trouble and someone who doesn't belong here, the room's atmosphere shifts. More people start noticing what's happening. The waiter's behavior stands out like a stark contrast to the quiet elegance that Margaret exudes. At first, it's subtle, a few heads turning to glance at the unfolding scene. But soon, the whispers grow louder. One patron, sitting nearby, taps his phone screen to start recording, capturing every word of Ryan's unjust treatment. Another woman at a table mutters to her companion, "This is ridiculous. Why is he speaking to her like that?" The murmurs grow louder as more people begin to pay attention, some giving sympathetic looks to Margaret. One or two of them exchange glances, with a shared look of disbelief at how the waiter is treating an elderly woman. The tension builds as the crowd realizes that they're witnessing not just an isolated incident, but a glaring example of prejudice and disrespect. People seem to feel uncomfortable, some shifting in their seats, others averting their eyes, not wanting to get involved. But a few brave souls begin to speak up, quietly at first, muttering under their breath, "That's wrong," and "he has no right to treat her that way." Margaret, as always, remains composed, but now the eyes of the room are on her. Despite her quiet resolve, the injustice of the situation is undeniable. More people record. Some shake their heads in disbelief. Margaret's experience in such situations is vast, but she never anticipated this type of confrontation in what should have been a peaceful dining experience. Margaret, her calm dignity unwavering, looks at Ryan and, in a composed yet firm tone, asks, "I would like to speak to your manager, please." She's trying to keep the situation civil, knowing that escalating it further will only cause more harm. However, Ryan, clearly irritated by her composed response, takes her request as a personal affront. "We don't need people like you ruining the vibe here," Ryan snaps, his voice rising in volume as he looks around the restaurant. He glares at the nearby patrons, who have now shifted in their seats, visibly uncomfortable. His words hang in the air, full of disdain and judgment. Margaret, though hurt by the public humiliation, refuses to let his words break her spirit. Her eyes lock with Ryan's for a moment before she speaks again, this time with quiet authority. "Young man, you have no idea who I am." Her words are not meant to provoke, but to remind him that dignity and respect are due to everyone, regardless of their appearance. The rest of the room falls into a tense silence as the weight of her statement lingers in the air. The patrons who have been quietly watching now hold their breath, some exchanging glances with one another, waiting for something to change. Margaret's voice is calm, but the hurt in her eyes is visible. She's endured much more than this in her life, and she's well aware of the prejudice people like Ryan often carry. But she won't let that ignorance define her. As the quiet tension builds, the restaurant manager finally rushes over from the back, alerted by the commotion. He arrives at the scene, clearly flustered, taking in the situation at a glance. Before Margaret can explain the full context of what happened, Ryan, in an attempt to justify his actions, interrupts loudly. "She's just trying to get a free meal," he accuses, pointing at Margaret with an exaggerated gesture. His tone is dripping with suspicion, and he looks at the manager with a smirk, fully expecting to be supported. He's confident that his version of the story will be believed without question. Margaret, still composed, turns her gaze toward the manager. "I have asked for the manager's attention because I feel that I've been treated unfairly, and this young man's behavior is unprofessional," she begins, her voice calm but firm. "I have not raised my voice, and I have not caused any disturbance. I simply wanted to be treated with respect, as I am entitled to, just like every other patron in this establishment." The manager, unsure of how to respond at first, glances at the crowd, where people are still recording, and takes in the situation. He realizes the gravity of the moment and starts to soften, his professional demeanor beginning to take over. He turns to Ryan, his voice much quieter now, trying to manage the situation with care. "I'll need you to step aside for a moment, Ryan," the manager says, addressing the waiter with a firm but calm tone. Ryan's expression falters for just a second, but his pride doesn't let him back down easily. He protests, muttering under his breath, but the manager insists, motioning for him to step away. As Ryan steps back, visibly uncomfortable but trying to save face, the manager turns back to Margaret, his demeanor now one of concern. "I deeply apologize for this behavior, ma'am," he says, his voice sincere. "Please let me offer you a complimentary meal, and ensure that you are treated with the utmost respect from here on out." He glances at the other patrons, who are now watching with renewed attention. Margaret nods slowly, her expression still calm, though a small sense of relief washes over her. "I appreciate your apology," she says, her tone still dignified. "But I believe the matter here is not about free meals. It's about respect." She looks around at the other guests, whose murmurs of approval begin to rise. "All I ask for is to be treated as a person, not as an outsider or a nuisance." Her words resonate deeply in the room, and the atmosphere begins to shift. The tension that had been building starts to dissipate, replaced by a feeling of solidarity and reflection. Many of the patrons, some of whom had been silent during the exchange, begin to nod in agreement, their gaze no longer on the floor, but on Margaret, a woman who held herself with grace even in the face of prejudice. The manager nods once more, a look of understanding crossing his face. "I will make sure that this never happens again," he promises. As the tension from the earlier confrontation begins to settle, the sound of the door opening cuts through the room. A well-dressed man in his late 40s enters, exuding confidence and authority. He moves with purpose, his gaze scanning the room until it lands on Margaret, who is still seated at the table, her calm demeanor in stark contrast to the chaos around her. The man's face softens when he sees his mother, and without hesitation he strides toward her. "What's going on here?" he asks, his voice strong yet filled with concern. Margaret, surprised yet composed, looks up at him. Her expression softens as she stands to greet him. "Michael," she says with a warm smile, "you're just in time." Ryan, still standing awkwardly, sees the man approaching and assumes he's just another random patron, probably unaware of the situation. Without hesitation, he starts explaining the incident in a way that paints Margaret as the problem. "This lady," he begins arrogantly, "was trying to cause trouble, demanding special treatment. She was rude and uncooperative, and I had to step in. This is a high-end restaurant, and we can't allow people like her to—" Before he can finish, Michael cuts him off. With an almost unnerving calm, he introduces himself. "I'm Michael Johnson," he says, his voice unwavering. "I'm the owner of this restaurant chain." Ryan's mouth goes dry, his face turning an ashen pale, as his eyes widen in disbelief. The realization hits him like a ton of bricks. He had no idea who Margaret was or the gravity of the woman he'd just insulted. Michael steps forward, his gaze steady, never breaking eye contact with Ryan. "This is my mother, Margaret Johnson," he continues, his tone calm but powerful. "The woman you just insulted built this company with me. Everything you see here exists because of her wisdom, leadership, and guidance." The room falls silent, the weight of Michael's words sinking in as they reverberate through the restaurant. Ryan stumbles back, his jaw working as if he's searching for words that simply aren't there. I didn't know. I'm so sorry," he mumbles, his voice now shaky. But it's too late. The damage has already been done. The truth is out in the open, and the realization that Ryan, the arrogant waiter, has just insulted one of the most influential women in the restaurant's history fills the room with a palpable sense of discomfort. The crowd, who had been watching the situation unfold in uncomfortable silence, suddenly erupts in applause. It starts slowly, but soon the clapping grows louder, a show of support for Margaret and a condemnation of Ryan's disrespect. People who had previously been passive now rise to their feet, their hands clapping in solidarity with the woman who had been mistreated. Ryan stands frozen in place, his face flushed with embarrassment as he watches the crowd's reaction. He stammers, trying to apologize once again, but his words are lost in the din of the applause. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean," he begins, but no one is paying attention to him anymore. His actions have already spoken louder than any apology he could offer. Margaret, though standing with grace, feels a deep sense of vindication. She gives Michael a nod of approval, knowing this moment isn't just about her. It's about respect for every person, regardless of their background or status. As the applause continues, Margaret turns to face the crowd and, with a smile that reflects her quiet strength, simply says, "Thank you." Her words are met with even more clapping, a reaffirmation of her dignity and grace in the face of disrespect. Ryan, still standing there, begins to back away, the weight of his actions now fully sinking in. The restaurant manager, who had been silent up until now, steps forward and addresses him firmly. "Ryan, I'll need you to come with me. We'll be having a discussion about your behavior," he says, motioning toward the back of the restaurant. Ryan's face falls even further, realizing the severity of the consequences he's about to face. As the situation settles and Ryan is escorted away, Michael turns to his mother. He places a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his voice warm with affection. "Let's get you something to eat, Mom. You deserve it." Margaret nods, smiling softly at her son, feeling both proud and humbled by the support she's received. Together, they sit at the table, surrounded by the applause and admiration of the restaurant's patrons, a powerful reminder that respect and kindness should never be measured by appearances or assumptions. Michael, still visibly upset by the situation, turns to the manager with an expression that brooks no argument. "Fire him," he commands, his voice calm but firm. The manager hesitates for a moment, clearly uncomfortable, but Michael's authority and the gravity of the situation leave him with no choice. Ryan, still reeling from his mistake, tries to protest. "You can't do this. It was just a misunderstanding. I didn't know who she was," he stammers, his words coming out in quick, panicked bursts. But Michael doesn't give him a chance to explain further. He cuts him off with a single, pointed sentence. "If you can't respect my mother, you don't belong in this company." The weight of his words is undeniable, and the crowd around them falls silent, sensing the finality in Michael's tone. Ryan stands there for a moment, mouth agape, before his shoulders slump in defeat. He knows there is nothing left to say. The manager, looking uncomfortable yet resolute, walks over to Ryan and asks him to leave the premises immediately. Without another word, Ryan grabs his belongings and exits the restaurant, his head hanging low as he disappears into the street. Margaret, who has remained composed throughout the entire ordeal, gently places a hand on her son's arm, her voice soft yet filled with wisdom. "Let this be a lesson for him," she says. "We can't change the past, but we can choose to be better in the future." Her words, simple but profound, resonate with everyone in the room. The patrons who had witnessed the exchange look at Margaret with newfound respect. They had seen her grace under pressure, her ability to handle the situation with dignity despite the insult. Her words are not just a lesson for Ryan, but a reminder for everyone present that personal growth comes from the choices we make in the face of adversity. As Margaret and Michael prepare to leave, the crowd murmurs in approval, with many offering quiet words of admiration. Some patrons approach Margaret to apologize for the treatment she endured, and others express their gratitude for the way she handled the situation. Margaret nods graciously, her smile never faltering. As she exits the restaurant with Michael, she feels a sense of peace, knowing that her quiet strength and grace have made a lasting impact on those who were fortunate enough to witness it. The incident, though painful, has sparked a conversation about respect, humility, and the importance of treating others with dignity, regardless of their background. As Ryan walks out of the restaurant, his mind is a whirlwind of regret and self-reflection. The sting of humiliation is sharp, but deeper still is the realization of how his actions have cost him far more than just his job. He begins to understand that his behavior wasn't just a mistake. It was rooted in deep biases he had never questioned. As he steps into the cold night air, Ryan makes a vow to himself. He will take the time to educate himself about respect, equality, and the importance of treating all people with dignity. He knows it will be a long road, but the first step is recognizing his fault, and for the first time, he feels the weight of his actions and the responsibility to change. Meanwhile, Margaret and Michael share a quiet moment together in the calm after the storm. As they sit in the back of the restaurant, surrounded by the now quiet atmosphere, Michael looks at his mother with deep admiration. "You've taught me everything about resilience and kindness," he says softly. "Today, the world saw that too." Margaret smiles warmly, her eyes reflecting both the pain of the experience and the pride of overcoming it with grace. "It wasn't about showing him up," she responds. "It was about showing everyone that respect is something that should be given to everyone, no matter their background." Michael nods, understanding the true depth of his mother's wisdom. The lesson is clear. Kindness and dignity will always be the strongest response to ignorance and prejudice. The impact of Margaret's strength has reverberated far beyond the restaurant, touching the lives of everyone who witnessed her grace. As they leave the restaurant, Margaret and Michael know that while the world may still have its challenges, they have taken another step toward creating a better, more respectful society, one small moment at a time.